All right, guys, we're back again on day 34. If you guys were watching the last tutorial, you managed to know that we're just about to end wintertime and get right into springtime. And as we kind of continue on into springtime and kind of just beginning to get there, you're gonna notice a few different things. Obviously, the weather changing. But before we get into that and I explain any more, if you guys are enjoying checking out my channel here and watching these guides, feel free to hang out with me on Twitch TV. All Fun and Games. You guys can check out the exact same way that I spell it on YouTube. Is the exact same way that I spell it on Twitch. I stream every single day. You can ask me any question that you like on stream. I always am up for answering questions. If I don't know the answer, chances are somebody else on my stream will know. So feel free to hang out there as well too. But let's get into another tutorial as we just are about to say goodbye to wintertime. So we have our resources. Our handbat is starting to go stale, which is okay for now because we definitely don't need to be worrying too much about that. But one thing that we are worried about is if we're going to be able to get ourselves some more armor. So we have one pig skin left and we're going to need more of those, and I'm going to show you different ways on how to get that, because we're going to need to continue on to get more helmets, and helmets are very essential to keeping our brain nice and protected. So if you have not made yourself a handbat yet, you're going to want to take one pig skin and one pig rope, and one rope and make yourself a football helmet as we did before. And there we go. So we're all prepared. Now, if you have a Wigford in the server, the Wigford can easily make you some helmets by using rocks, gold like we did earlier when Aki was helping us out. We're going to heal ourselves up. But now, if you are next to a tent, of course, we are going to be here for a while. So let's go ahead and cook up these juicy berries, because juicy berries are awesome. And whenever you make them, they always give you about 20 hunger per berry that you chew. However, they definitely spoil a lot quicker. So if you do find juicy berries in your world and you want to relocate them closer to your base, you can do the same thing. They just don't fit together as well as regular little berry bushes do. So before we continue on outside of our base, we're going to want to look at our base and see what we're missing. So if you have a chance to look around your base, you want to say to yourself, well, there's going to be lots and lots and lots of rain that is going to appear in springtime. And that's the difference between the beginning of spring to the middle of spring to the end of spring. Is the beginning of spring kind of gives you a little bit of time to prepare, kind of thing. The weather changes, it's still a little bit cold, and that's how the seasons generally work. So transitioning from autumn to winter, near the end of autumn, it starts to get colder, then it gets very cold, and then it gets warmer and warmer, and then so on and so on. So now that we're 2 days away from springtime, you're going to notice that things are going to start to get warmer. Our characters are going to start to get warmer as as it leads to the beginning of springtime, and we're not going to really need our thermal stone as much. We're not going to need to go back to our base as much. And also, the best thing about it is you're going to notice that the nights are going to start to get less and less abundant. So they're not going to last as long, which is great because that's going to give us more time to prepare. So there's a few options that we can do in this pace. We can either show you how to get ready to kill an essential boss, which in my eyes, it is essential. But in some cases, I don't think I want to put you guys into that predicament right away because, after all, this is a beginner's guide. I don't think you need to go out and fight a boss unless you absolutely need to. And the deer clops is really essential. It will become one of the best items that you use inside the game. So I really think that the deer clops is essential for killing. And the boss that I'm referring to is the dragonfly. Now, I mentioned that boss in my last video, and I said that, maybe I'll show you how to do it, but I think we're going to avoid it for the sake of the first year at least. Come to the second year on Don't Starve Together, we might brush on it a little bit, but I think that as of right now, I don't really want you guys focusing on fighting bosses. I want you focusing on surviving an entire year in Don't Starve Together. And once you get that down, then we can talk a little bit further on what to do. So we're going to be basically just walking around and gathering resources. So take your chester if you have a chester. If you don't have a chester, we're going to be looking for more berry bushes, and we're going to be looking for grass as well too. I myself am going to go head out and look for grass. One thing I'm going to suggest you do not do, because we don't have a lot of grass in our base right now, I'm going to suggest you do not take the grass that is close around your base. Do not do that. Leave that stuff alone, and instead look for the grass that is very, very far outside of your base. And we're going to look for grass stuff. So we're going to take Chester with us. We're going to head on out. I wouldn't mind if you take maybe a meatball or two with you as well too. But for now, we're going to go out and start gathering resources. And that's kind of basically where we're going to be doing for the next few days while we prepare for springtime. So as we gather for resources, we're trying to get ourselves basically anything that kind of looks appealing to us. So any berry bushes that are close by, we want to make sure that we grab those. I'm going to focus mainly on berry bushes and grass, and that's about it. Now the juicy berry bushes, I don't necessarily suggest bringing them back to the base unless you want to. They're not really essential. I prefer that you focus on like the smaller ones because they tend to fit closer around a flingomatic. I find that the big juicy berry bushes take up a lot of room, and also when you're trying to when you're trying to take things into a base and kind of compile them together, they kind of take up too much room to, I'd rather just have 2 or 3 berry bushes next to each other than have 1 or 2 juicy berry bushes. So, and as you can see that the the snow just melted, and now we're seeing ourselves get into the beginning of what looks to be springtime. Now, it's still a little bit dim outside, and as it gets to springtime in the morning, you're going to see the transition of Don't Starve Together as the light changes, and now we're going to be getting closer and closer to spring, which means rain is around the corner, flowers are going to be blooming, and the berry bushes are going to start to grow. I wouldn't mind you leaving a few berry bushes as well too. Don't take them all. I've done that before, and if your base catches on fire, you're not going to have a good time if that happens. So just try to avoid doing that for now. Maybe leave a handful around. If you want to take them all, that is entirely up to you, but I would really suggest leaving just some of them alone if possible. So let's grab a bunch of grass, maybe 2 full stacks. And, like I said, make sure that you're grabbing the grass that is not close to your base, so that way you don't end up using it. For example, the best thing about using resources away from your base is that if anything happens, for example, your base burns down, or you accidentally used all your grass, or you forgot to fertilize your grass, or your grass turns into what is called grass geckos, which sounds odd if you're hearing it for the first time, but grass and Don't Starve Together will disease. It'll turn into disease, which basically requires you to pick the grass up and replant it. And same with other bushes and whatnot, will do the same as well too. So you basically have to take it and replant it and refertilize it. Or grass will turn into grass geckos as well too. So grass geckos generally appear after a certain period of time in the game, and that's why it's always important to not really rely on necessarily the grass in your base, but kind of focusing on leaving some grass around your area as well too. So we got our 2 stacks of grass. We have a few berry bushes, which is not a lot, but just enough to kind of go back and fill the area that we have around us. And I brought Chester along the way just in case we had some extra stuff that we needed. But as springtime arrives, we're just gonna focus on getting a lot of resources and filling our base with a ton of stuff. Now, when you go through the process of filling your base up, you don't really want to focus heavily on that. Like, I'm going to show you how to do it because I want you guys to get used to, giving yourself a lot of resources. But the thing that you want to make sure that you're cautious about is just stacking up on tiny things like berries, meat and such, because what's going to happen is the more that you do that, the faster it's going to spoil, and then you're going to find yourself dealing with spoiled food periodically. And that's not really something that you want to do. So I'm just kind of focusing on getting us some grass. I'm focusing on getting some saplings and some more berry bushes. Our twigs, they seem to be okay, so I'm not too concerned about them right now. We're beginning to get a little bit cold here, so let's go ahead and drop our grass tufts off and our berries, and go over here, eat some meatballs, turn on the fire pit, get nice and toasty, eat our meatballs, and continue to think about what we want to do next. So next, we want to warm up. Once we're warmed up next to the fire, we're going to check on a few things. Now, keep in mind, your bird is not going to survive forever. So that being said, if you notice that your bird hasn't been fed, feel free to hover over it, and it'll say, your bird will tell you how long it dies on if you're using the Show Me mod. But unfortunately, it shows 15 days before, so that's not, that's not like it's around the corner, so we don't necessarily have to worry about that. And we're going to be using that bird to making eggs here very shortly. So as I mentioned before, if you have stuff in your fridge, start to look at your fridge if you're using the Show Me mod. It'll say, okay, you have 14 days before this starts to spoil, 12 days before, and so on and so on and so on. Honey is the best ingredient to have, so I always suggest leaving that there. And of course, you can see that ice will never ever lose value inside of your fridge, so you never have to worry about ice whatsoever. It's always a good ingredient to have in there just for emergency cases in case you absolutely need some sort of filler. So as the night goes on, I think the next step is to try to prepare us for making what is known as tooth traps. Now, in springtime, what ends up happening is there's something known as a frog rain. And frog rain is very, very, very annoying to encounter for the first time. And you're going to you might encounter frog rain, you might not encounter frog rain, but being prepared for frog rain is probably the best thing you can do rather than just running around when they decide to chase you down. So frog rain is exactly what it sounds. It's basically a bunch of frogs falling from the sky. It could be a limited amount of frogs. It could be a lot of frogs, but when they drop, you'll definitely know it. So first, we're going to make ourselves a few different things. So with the grass extra rope that we found, or if you want to manufacture yourself some grass as well too, we're going to make ourselves two things. First, we're going to make ourselves another bug net because we have the silk for it. And then next, we're going to make ourselves an extra tent. So if we need one more rope for that and we got ourselves another tent, I would suggest do not put the tents in the same spots just in case you need to access them, but always make sure that the tents are within the fling-o-matic range. So even if you want to make a tent over here for your friend or something, and you can kind of tell which one is which, or if you want to use a different skin for the tent, but you're going to need more than one tent as it goes on. And always leave yourself with extra silk as well too. Obviously each tent doesn't take very much. It only takes 6 silk. So let's go ahead and make another one. And then we can still have some extra silk left over and still have some extra grass left over. The one thing to be extra cautious about is that, like I said, if your flingo burns down or runs out of flingo fuel, and then you end up with, you know, a tent that's on fire, you kind of want them to be a little bit spaced out so they're not going to set each other on fire. And there we go. We still have some stuff left over. I don't know if we have any extra fireflies near our base, but let's quickly run out as fast as we can, try to catch some before we run back. And then on our way back, we'll grab all those extra morsels that are on the ground from us not picking up our rabbits. So the tents are what we're going to need, because not because of the frog rain, because of regular rain itself. On Don't Starve Together, when it rains a ton, your character is going to get very insane, get cold, and it's going to be very hard when your wetness meter goes through the roof to regain, you know, the wetness and the sanity back, unless you have, of course, an umbrella. So if your friends don't have one and they want to regain their sanity, it's going to be the best resource that they can have, to have a tent that they can sleep in at night to regain that. So as you're heading back, if you guys see anything that you want to pick up, for example, if you see, you know, another berry bush or something and you want to pick that up, you can feel free to grab that. But in the meantime, just kind of focus on what we were mentioning about getting yourself more grass. Anything else that you see along the way? Let's grab that meat and we'll replant our traps again. If you are having trouble replanting the traps, don't plant them over here like this. You can. You probably won't catch them. Just make sure you're planting them right on top of the holes. Get your meat. Put it back down. You notice that that one only has one use left. And that'll give you some more meat periodically. And like I said, it's kind of just an extra thing. Come springtime, though, those traps are going to become useless because in springtime, the holes will get kind of, they look like damp holes. Basically, they get very like muddy, and the rabbits will no longer come outside of them. So if you want, you can go ahead and plant your grass now and kind of get into the process of getting, you know, those all planted, because we're going to need to have plenty of grass, plenty of twigs, plenty of berries, and we're also going to be getting ready to stack up on tons and tons and tons of gobblers. And that's what's going to be the most exciting part, is how much meat we're going to be having here very soon. So you're going to make sure that you don't get too many berry bushes, because of course the more that you have, the worse that you're going to be using for filler, and it's going to be a lot to maintain. But that doesn't mean don't feel bad for getting a lot of it. I just mean don't overwhelm yourself where you're basically spending all the time in springtime focusing on your, you know, your little farms that you have for berries and whatnot. So don't really, like I said, don't spend too much time on it, but at the same time, don't forget about it. I obviously got two different berry bushes here. You can see that there's two different versions of them. One is obviously, they don't really kind of mesh well together, but as long as you're planting them close around this area, that's all that really matters. So that way, when the gobblers come out. Now, your berries are going to spoil in 1.4 days. Now, so there's a better recipe that you can use. I wish I knew exactly what it was offhand, but it does involve honey. I think it's like, from what I remember, I think it's like a veggie, honey, berries, and like a twig or something. I wish I would remember, but it's called the powder cake. And what the powder cake does is basically like an unlimited. It just lasts forever, and it'll attract all the gobblers that are inside the area. So while I quickly look up that recipe, or if Kiri, if you want to have a chance to take a look at that recipe to let me know exactly what it is, I'm gonna fertilize my berry bushes first. And then I'm gonna fertilize the grass after. And I'm gonna, now you might say, okay, how am I gonna get a lot of fertilizer? Because I'm not really able to get a lot of it, or I can't find a lot, or where do I get more of it, or what do I do if I'm running low on fertilizer? So there's a few different things that you can do. One is one technique that I might have already shown you, where basically you can get poop from the werepigs, corn, honey, and 2 twigs. Okay, so we need corn, and unfortunately we don't have any corn right now, so we're gonna have to try to grow some if we can. So one way to get yourself with more poop, or like a lot of poop in that matter, is by using a pig. When turned into a werepig, will eat endless amounts of veggies. Now that doesn't mean go over to a werepig when it's, you know, full moon and toss them a bunch of carrots, because that is a huge waste. But there's something called light bulbs, and those are known in the caves where you can go and get them. Now for the sake of actually getting a lot of poop, because we're going to probably need a lot of it come springtime, and we're going to be refertilizing and unfertilizing and all that stuff, I'm going to show you a tactic on how to do that. So in the meantime, I'm going to drop off the rest of these. Bushes. Actually, I'll just plant them. Why not? And get these all organized in that way. And like I said, springtime doesn't necessarily have to be the day, you know, the year or the season of going ahead and getting yourself a bunch of stuff. You don't have to do this. You don't have to follow these rules. You can continue on to just do whatever you like. But I'm just basically saying that this is an easier way for beginner guides to avoid focusing on killing bosses, and more so focus on learning how to maintain your base and getting yourself a lot of stuff. So we're going to continue on through the process of getting more twigs, and then I'm going to go into the caves and show you another process. So 2 things we have on our horizon right now. One of them being, I'm going to swap out for this, and I'm going to put my old thermal stone in the ground. 2 things that we have on the horizon. One is that we're gonna be focusing on getting ourselves tooth traps, as I mentioned before, which are going to help us with our frogs, and then we're going to be focusing on getting ourselves some more things like the powder cake, because I mentioned that we want to get some corn for that, and then of course we want to try to get ourselves more recipes, which also going to come in handy for later on as well too, but mainly focusing on meatballs, pierogies, the basics of the basics. So looking around on the map, you're gonna try to look to see if we can find ourselves an entrance into the caves.
Thanks again for watching this video. See you in the next one.